engaging in megaphone diplomacy at multilateral platforms. We have already repeatedly stated that we are not interested in escalating tensions with Warsaw, and we repeat that today. What warrants separate mention is a constructive and responsible approach of the Belarusian side in the context of what transpired. The relevant organs of the Republic of Belarus, through the relevant mechanisms, promptly informed Polish colleagues about existing risks, having demonstrated a responsible approach and a willingness to engage in cooperation. This is a policy which is based on exchange of objective information, coordination of action, and it should serve as an example for a good faith conduct amid such incidents. Mr. President, unfortunately, the reaction to the incident in Polish and European political establishment and media outlets gives rise, under these circumstances, to significant questions. The head of EU diplomacy, Kaja Kallas, without having awaited official conclusions, rushed to make loud statements about the alleged deliberate violation of Polish airspace, advancing her favorite talking point about investments in European defense, that is, continuation of the militarization thereof. Hysterical outbursts about the alleged aggression from the Russian Federation is also heard from other European capitals. This is all very similar to the information campaign, the goal of which is to maintain the level of external mobilization around Ukraine and to continue to egg on allies to continue to provide new and new weapons. In this vein, we would be well advised to recall the incident which occurred in Przewód in November 2022, when, as a result of the fall of a missile, 2 Polish citizens died. At that point, tensions were also being ignited. However, 1 year later, the General Prosecutor and the Minister of Justice, Zbigniew Zerbo, recognized that both the launch location and the ownership of the missile were Ukrainian. And the former president of Poland, Andrzej Duda, in an interview with the journalist Bogdan Romanowski, recently explicitly recognized that at that point the Kiev regime was attempting to pressure Warsaw to levy accusations against Russia. According to him, this was a deliberate attempt to draw Poland and consequently NATO into an armed conflict. This candid comment from the Polish politician is an important recognition, which is not being quoted by European newspapers, nor discussed it in national parliaments, but we think it is important today to remind you of this. We are talking about a desire of Kiev to at all costs engage in the confrontation with Russia. More and more states. It is no secret that Ukraine has long been consistently attempting to expand the geography of the conflict with no regard for the consequences of such an escalation. The Polish authorities, for all of these years, in an anti-Russian frenzy, were willing to support any, regardless of how criminal, regardless of how reckless, any actions of the Kiev regime, and were eagerly indulging it, hoping to harm the Russian Federation using its hands. Unfortunately, the Polish authorities are not drawing any conclusions, and they're continuing to engage in a policy of escalation in Europe. For example, at the pretext of conducting a joint Russian-Belarusian exercises, the West Zapad 2025, the Polish authorities already announced the closure of the border with Belarus, and they announced the intention to deploy to that area up to 40,000 military personnel. Let us recall that our above-mentioned strategic exercises are defensive in nature. They do not pose any threat for any neighboring country. And the representatives of OSCE countries, including Poland, have been invited to observe them. However, the decision was taken, the border is closed, and the victims of this decision are ordinary citizens whose freedom of movement has been denied. In any conflict, when we are talking about provocations, the key question remains unchanged. Who does this benefit? The response here is obvious. All of this artificially blown up hysteria is beneficial exclusively to the head of the Kiev regime and the European Party of War, who are desperately trying to derail prospects for Ukrainian resolution, which began to take shape as a result of the Russian-US contacts in August. It is evident that Zelensky is now the main opponent to a political resolution of the Ukrainian crisis, which will uncover his illegitimacy. Without the conflict, the justification for the legal vacuum will disappear. This justification, which he is using to cling to power in circumvention of constitutional procedures, even according to the data of Ukrainian sociological centers, Zelensky's ratings are falling precipitously, as is the level of trust in him. In this context, the unabated military actions, hostilities, are a tool for political survival of the Ukrainian regime. Against the backdrop of this, what is becoming clear is the level of despair prompting the Kiev authorities to throw remnants of the people forcibly mobilized into battle, or more accurately, to slaughter, despite the colossal losses and skyrocketing desertion rates. Official data for 2025 shows that more than 140,000 criminal cases have been initiated for soldiers who abandoned their units. The overall figures for desertion since the start of the conflict are nearing 266,000 people. The effective stabbing levels in combat units at 50% is viewed as a success, and the real losses exceeding 15 to 20,000 people per month has long ago outstripped the pace of mobilization. People no longer wish to die for a corrupt leadership which long ago has ceased to represent the interests of society. The head of the UAF, Syrsky, recently recognized that Russia has a threefold advantage in manpower and capabilities, and in the main areas has a 4 to 6-fold advantage. This is a frank recognition of failure and essentially an indictment of the current military political policy. And this is precisely why Zelensky today is willing to do anything at all to maintain this conflict in the active phase, even if this may give rise to threats, if this means simulating threats, exaggerating consequences, or, as was the case in Pshevod, manipulating any incident in order to drag NATO countries into the war. What is noteworthy is how easily the head of the Kiev regime recants his own loud statements as soon as they no longer advance his political interests. In recent months, he invoked slogans about the supposed intention to engage in dialogue. However, the direct, unambiguous proposal from the Russian president to visit our capital to discuss the whole gamut of issues related to Ukrainian resolution was rejected by him under the pretext of the inadmissibility and the inability to travel, quote, while his country is under attack. And yet, as we see, there have been no attacks which prevented him from trekking to European capitals for 3+ years and making demands for more weapons deliveries and increased military assistance. Because in those capitals, the discussion is about continuing the war and this is completely in line with his interests. As soon as a real opportunity for peace emerged, with a visit to with a White House leader taking office who is willing to deal with the root causes of the crisis and to seek a lasting solution, Zelensky immediately began to renounce the previously announced peace initiative. This merely bears out what we were pointing to from the very start. The Kiev regime never had any intention to embrace peace, and everything that the regime is doing is to prolong the conflict, to cling to power, and to continue to take advantage of his Western sponsors. Weapons deliveries, sanctions misadventures, and Brussels propagandistic hysteria do not bring peace any closer, but rather entrenches the illusion in Kiev that they will manage to change the reality. However, it is not possible to change the reality. Every new month of hostilities merely brings the regime closer to collapse and raises the cost of resolution. The Russian Federation remains wedded to a responsible approach. We are open to constructive cooperation with everybody who genuinely is